Broncos have gotten a couple of wins in the last 3 weeks, a couple of big wins against the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs. I think everyone is writing off the Broncos after that 70-point disaster against the Miami Dolphins. With that said, is it time to start apologizing to Sean Payton?
Well, I don't know if I owe Sean Payton an apology for saying that he was a terrible coach or potentially going to get fired because this thing wasn't going to work, but I don't think it's going to work. I'm still putting that out there. I don't think this is going to go the way the Broncos think it's going to go because they need some more talented players. That's the problem, first and foremost. They need more talented players. With that being said, the Denver Broncos have put together a competent offense. They scored 20 points in 3 consecutive games, which I think is the first time that's happened since Brock Osweiler was their quarterback. Denver's offense has been dead to rights for like 6 seasons now, and this is the first time they've shown any signs of life over that 6-year span. And honestly, I think you can chalk some of that up to Sean Payton because they didn't change any of the pieces on offense. It's still Russell Wilson. It's still Javonte Williams. I know they had Chase Edmonds last year, but they replaced him with another interchangeable running back. They still have Sutton. They still have Judy. Tim Patrick still has a torn Achilles, which it feels like it's just like a rotating door of which Broncos wide receiver is going to have a catastrophic injury in the preseason. So Denver is in a position where they brought back basically the same team that was 30th in the NFL in offense under Nathaniel Hackett. And now they're 17th in the league in offense. And over the last 3 weeks have scored 20 or more points. And so Denver's offense looks like it's showing signs of life. And I think we can chalk some of that up to Sean Payton, I would assume. I mean, Sean Payton is getting the same ingredients in the kitchen that Nathaniel Hackett had and is showing some signs of life on offense.
Now, I know that the Broncos lost to the Jets, but if you're Sean Payton, you have to feel a little vindicated in your offseason comments about Nathaniel Hackett because you're still looking at what's happening in New York where Zach Wilson and Nathaniel Hackett can't figure it out together. And you're starting to see the improvements for the Denver Broncos, meanwhile, on their offense, where you are seeing Russell Wilson, who a lot of people are saying washed, a lot of people are saying is one of the most disappointing contracts and trades of all time, is now starting to look not completely like old Russ, but he's back in the sense like the touchdown interception ratio, fantastic. 18-4. That's great numbers for Russell Wilson. He only threw 16 passing touchdowns last year. So that should speak volumes as far as the turnaround for this Broncos team. Russell Wilson, like, I'm not ready to say he's fully back. I don't think he's there. He's like, when we talk about back, he was at one point a top 5 quarterback, slipped down in the top 10. Now he's about kind of like in that like middle of the pack, 10 to 18 range, somewhere in there. I think you'll probably slot him, at least based off his production this year. What do you think of Russell Wilson's season and the improvements under Sean Payton? Anything you're noticing?
Mid is okay. Mid is okay. Look, Russell Wilson was always somewhere between the MVP Hall of Fame player that he was in Seattle. Because let's not forget that Russell Wilson has a Hall of Fame resume from his time with the Seattle Seahawks. If not for that season where Lamar Jackson won unanimous MVP, Russell Wilson would have been MVP that year. Like he had a Hall of Fame level resume with Hawks. And then the last season with the Broncos, where it was like 16 interceptions and 13 interceptions and 16 touchdowns. And they were talking about benching him for like Brett Ripien or some shit. So it was always going to be somewhere in between there for Russell Wilson. And if your quarterback can give you 18 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. I think he has a couple fumbles in there. So like a 3-to-1 touchdown to turnover ratio. That's a quarterback you can work with regardless of whether or not he's throwing the ball down the field, regardless of whether or not he's taking sacks or playmaking. You can work with 3-to-1 touchdown to turnover ratio. And Russell Wilson, yes, he's making a lot of money. And that's the first thing that the Broncos are going to point to is like, we could get this level of production from someone on a rookie contract, blah, 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 blah. Look, they're going to have an expensive quarterback for the next few years, and that's okay. Sean Payton took that job knowing they were committed to Russell Wilson for probably 2 more seasons before they could legitimately think about moving on from him, and they have made it work. Now they have other holes that they need to fill. The defense has clearly regressed because Vance Joseph is like just awful at defense and defensive scheming, but Russell Wilson being what he is now in that, like you mentioned, 10 to 18 range, 10 to 18 range got Daniel Jones $160 million. 10 to 18 range is going to be good enough where the Broncos don't move off of Russell Wilson, because even though he's making top 10 money, if he's giving them 10 to 18 level performance, they're going to stick with Russell Wilson because they can make that work.
Well, at 18 touchdowns, you have to kind of project he's probably on pace to somewhere get around high 20s, low 30s in terms of total touchdown numbers for the year. So that would be a massive improvement if he almost doubled up his touchdown numbers from last year. So that's what you're paying Sean Payton for. You're paying him to make those improvements on offense and see if you can maximize what you got in Russ, because there's the good and bad with the Broncos obviously getting these last couple wins. The bad is that they're going to be taken out of that mix for a high-level rookie starting quarterback next year if they wanted to consider their exit plan from Russell Wilson. Now, I know there's a lot of financial commitment, sure, but we've also seen plenty of NFL teams more than happy to finagle themselves out of like a bad deal if they thought it was a bad contract. What I would say for Sean Payton, additionally, besides obviously the production we're now seeing on the field, the wins we're starting to see from the Broncos, is I think that he went in there and he's trying to change a whole culture, right? Is part of the struggle with the Broncos, because you've been more than happy to mention their struggles since the 2015 Super Bowl win, that the Broncos culture has just been a mess and they just have not been right. They have not been right as an organization for close to 10 years now. So trying to make a massive overhaul with the players that they had on the roster was not going to be an easy challenge. So we see them cutting bait with a guy like Randy Gregory and saying, take a hike. We don't care that we paid you last year. That's a kind of a big deal. And then we're going to have these conversations, I'm sure, in the offseason with like guys like Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton. I figure one of those wide receivers is probably gone this year. Right now, I mean, you look at Jerry Jeudy, he has not responded to Steve Smith's criticism from just a couple weeks ago. I think he had 3 targets against the Bills, total non-factor yet again. Part of that could be the offensive scheming. Part of that could be Russell Wilson. But Jerry Jeudy, as a first-round draft pick, as I want to say the first or second wide receiver off the board that year in the draft, yeah, he has to step up in that position to live up to what he was as a draft prospect. And it doesn't seem like he's going to be able to ever really do that in Denver. So it's more likely that he finds greener pastures somewhere else. But you do have to give credit that you are starting to see the improvements. Now, how far that can go. Now, we mentioned it. We've talked about it before. Obviously, Kansas City's in that division. That's going to pose issues for you. You look at the Chargers, the enigma that is the Los Angeles Chargers. They still do have an elite quarterback on any given week. I think this Broncos team could probably beat the Chargers just because the Chargers are a weird team. They're a hard to predict team, right? Justin Herbert, he could put up like 38 points and they could still lose, right? That's kind of like what the Chargers can give you on any given week. And then there's the Raiders who, hey, under Antonio Pierce, they seem to be doing pretty well. So, yeah.
The second place Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, the second place Las Vegas Raiders, who are in a tie with the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo are not looking too hot right now. So if we started the season and I told you the Denver Broncos had wins against Kansas City and Buffalo, you had said, damn, is this team competing for a Super Bowl? Now, as we sit here in the midway point, it's like, well, they finally broke the streak against Kansas City. So that's the good news. But Buffalo, they're looking pretty average themselves right now.
In the Monday night football game, I was at the Sacramento Kings game on Monday, and they had the game on the TV there. In the Hunt graphic, there was no Denver Broncos. With a win against the Buffalo Bills, the Denver Broncos were not in the hunt, which is kind of disrespectful, but I also get it. Like, this team is not very good. You mentioned Jerry Jeudy before. Jerry Jeudy is done in Denver. Like, he is not coming back at the end of this season. There is no world in which they're bringing back Jerry Jeudy after everything that's happened here. They would have traded him at the deadline if his value hadn't been so low. And you know what? The Atlanta Falcons will be happy to have you. That's all I've got to say to Jerry Jeudy, man. Like, it is down bad for Jerry Jeudy at this point. And this is the thing with Denver, quote unquote, getting where they want to go. Because you can talk about a culture change. You can talk about an improvement. They're in the same camp that I would put the Las Vegas Raiders, which is there is nothing you're going to be able to do to be able to catch Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. There's nothing you're going to be able to do. There's just no way, with the way the team is currently constructed and the draft capital they have at their disposal and the money that they've already allocated to the team, there's no way they're going to be able to catch Kansas City. So if the goal is to do like what the Chargers are doing, which is like, hey, we have a franchise quarterback, we're going to be the 5th seed or the 6th seed, and we can get a crack at Kansas City in the divisional round. and maybe we give them our best punch once we see them. If that's what they're shooting for, they need like 3 or 4 key positions to be filled with players who are either identified in the draft and developed in a way that other teams don't recognize. Because you mentioned they're not going to have a top 10 pick. Now, granted, sometimes blue chip players fall outside the top 10. See Micah Parsons over there in Dallas. See Justin Jefferson over there with Minnesota. Like TJ Watt with Pittsburgh. Like sometimes those players fall outside of the top 10. But Denver to be able to identify and evaluate those players at a level that other teams in the league will miss on. So they need either that or big fruit hits, like what the Eagles did with Hassan Reddick or something like that. Like they need 3 or 4 impact players in order to get to the place they want to go.
Now, here's what I would say to that. And this is, again, if Sean Payton is really earning his money out there in Denver, and this is going to obviously fall in their GM as well. When we look at the New Orleans Saints and the success they had during Sean Payton's run, it was identifying talent that was a bit off the radar and turning them into stars. Like Jimmy Graham, right? Wasn't Jimmy Graham undrafted or something, I want to say? And obviously
he was a basketball player.
Yeah, he went on to become a Hall of Fame level tight end. You look at Cesar Ruiz late in the first round. They were able to grab him. Guys like Marquise Colston back in the day. We got to give Sean Payton a little credit as a talent evaluator because especially later in his run in New Orleans, I do feel like a lot of the picking the groceries was on him, or at least it was more of a partnership between him and the GM there in New Orleans. So I feel as though as a talent evaluator, Sean Payton kind of knows what he's looking at. And I think he kind of looked at this Broncos roster throughout points in this year and has made necessary additions by subtraction. And I think we're going to continue to see that as he moves into future years. We saw that even despite the successes that we're starting to see from Russell Wilson this year, they were already talking at points in the year about like exit strategies there if things didn't improve. So you could tell that they're already starting to evaluate each and every position. Hell, I make fun of it at times within the fantasy football community. Taysom Hill, they managed to find a little bit of a gem there and turn him into a player that was usable on offense. We'll see. This is going to probably take a couple more years to really settle in, but it doesn't always need to be top of the draft. I mean, look at the 49ers. You always love to talk about them as one of the greatest collection of all pros in the league. Well, the Niners also drafted guys in the 5th round, like George Kittle, 3rd round, Fred Warner. You can find talent on the draft. It's the harder road to get there for sure, but it's entirely possible. It's not impossible, like you said. It's possible. It's just not easy. There's a difference.
Yes, that is fair. It's the hubris of these organizations to say, we can do what the Eagles are doing. We can do what the 49ers are doing. When, buddy, you're the Chargers. Like, it's hard to do what these organizations have done. And Denver has proven time and time and again that they haven't had those wins. And you're right about the Saints part of it. Mickey Loomis and Sean Payton both can go to the Hall of Fame based on what they did in terms of talent evaluation in New Orleans. And as we've seen in a number of cases, sometimes that well dries up and sometimes you have like, think about it with the Saints standpoint. The Saints were down for 3 or 4 years and then built that thing back up.
I forgot about Alvin Kamara, right? Another one of their big hits.
Yeah. Alvin Kamara was a 3rd round pick. Michael Thomas was a 2nd round pick. Ryan Ramczyk was at the bottom of the 1st round. They had a bunch of great hits in there. They also traded 2 first-round picks for Marcus Davenport. So I will say it wasn't all roses for the Saints. They did mess up in a couple places, but
they did get solid sack production from him 1 year to defend the Marcus Davenport pick.
He was a 4 and out, basically. He was 4 years and then, which honestly Trey Hendrickson was too, and they probably wish they had extended Trey Hendrickson instead of pivoting to Marcus Davenport. But again, you're going to miss on some. You're going to hit on some. The Seattle Seahawks drafted like 2 all-pro players in the 6 years post Legion of Boom, and one of them was the punter. Sometimes you hit on them, sometimes you miss on them. It happens. Talent evaluation is hard. And the Broncos are in a position where they need 3 or 4 really skilled players. And I don't think that's really like a shocking evaluation, right? Like Denver doesn't have a true number one wide receiver. The offensive line is shaky at best. I know they tried to piece some holes with bringing in Mike McGlinchey and extending Garrett Bowles, because Garrett Bowles had like 3 bad seasons, one season where he was top 5 in the league in blocks, and now I don't really know because I haven't seen his name come up very much. I know he's battled injuries. Like they're fundamental changes. And by the way, they still have the 32nd ranked defense in the NFL. Now, granted, a lot of that is because they gave up 70 points to the Dolphins, but they still technically have the 32nd ranked defense in the NFL. So
that's already
there's room for improvement.
That's already a negative mark as far as talent evaluation. Paying Mike McGlinchey, that's not a great look already. But I would say in McGlinchey's defense, he's always been a talented run blocker. I think a lot of misconception too with Sean Payton is, especially given what New Orleans was early on in the Drew Brees era, throw. They really relied on the running game later on in Sean Payton's tenure between that 1-2 punch of Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara. So I wouldn't be surprised if you told me, like you mentioned, like the interchangeable running backs behind him. But if Javonte Williams continues to look like he has in their resurgence, because I think a big portion of why they've been better on offense too has been Javonte Williams being healthier as he continues to recover from an ACL injury. So that's a big thing for them. Samaje Perine, he was a good backup addition for that team. I'm slipping on the other running back they have there. I think McLaughlin or something like that. In college, he was a stud, and I think that he's been a good part of the rotation as well. So if they build up the running game, they can fix the offensive line. That in itself will take some of the burden off of trying to acquire wide receivers, because I think that what this team will function best as is a run-first offense moving forward, not really an offense that's looking to pass. And then defensively, again, you mentioned it, the Vance Joseph element of this. Will they tighten the leash on like Vance Joseph moving forward? Like if he like struggles again, because we've seen the Broncos have been good on defense or relatively good on defense the last few weeks. If they struggle moving forward, is Vance Joseph gone by the end of the season? That is going to be something to keep an eye on, and who replaces him. Because I think when Sean Payton went to Denver, his ideal candidate obviously was, and we heard these reports, Vic Fangio, but Vic Fangio, being that he just got fired from the Broncos, wasn't exactly too keen on going back there. So that's kind of like the thing that led to the Vance Joseph hire. And I wonder if they're going to fix that element moving forward.
Vance Joseph, by the way, who also got fired as head coach of the Denver Broncos, which I just want to point out, it's been a rough decade for Denver, man. It's just that they had John Elway running their team for a minute because their family was fighting over ownership.
Yeah.
Like, it's been a rough decade.
How can we forget Vic Fangio, Vance Joseph having the time of his life. Remember that one announcer on that Monday Night Football? Who was that guy?
Yeah. God, but regardless, that Monday night game they played against the Raiders was the first time I've palpably seen a team quit on their head coach. Like, just physically saw a team quit on their head coach mid-game, and Vance Joseph got fired the next day. So yeah, the Broncos have been down bad for a minute. And look, Vance Joseph, bad defense coordinator. I feel like I have enough evidence to say that now. But besides the point, like, the other thing about evaluation that might work in their favor, Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis were most aggressive in trading up in the draft. If they saw someone they wanted, they were trading up in the draft. They were good at evaluating exactly the talented pieces that they wanted. They were willing to go up and trade for Patrick Mahomes. They did trade 2 first-round picks for Marcus Davenport. They traded a first-round pick for Trevor Penning. They traded it up. This is after Payton was gone, but they traded up to get Chris Olave. So this is a team that's not afraid to trade up in the draft, and that's something that could work in their favor. And you were talking about a run first offense for them. Look, Baltimore's a good evaluation of, like, sometimes you just got to change the names in the wide receiver room. You don't necessarily have to bring in an elite level wide receiver to fix your wide receiver room. Sometimes you just got to change the names up, and that might be a situation that better serves the Broncos. Like, if the Broncos showed up next year and their receiver room included, say, keep Cortland Sutton, and then you have Juju Smith-Schuster and Van Jefferson and a rookie. Like, just change up the names and see what happens. It's no better worse than the receiving room you have now, and really, really focus that draft capital on trying to build up that defense that you systematically took apart over the last couple of years by trading Von Miller and trading Bradley Chubb and letting some big names walk in free agency, and then signing Zach Allen to try and fill the holes. So I checked this up to kind of like the first year of a college coaching regime with Sean Payton. It's kind of interesting. It's like the results of the first year don't really matter all that much. Now, granted, it's nice that they've beaten Kansas City and beaten Buffalo these last couple weeks, and now they're 4-5 and they have scored 20 plus points in 3 consecutive games. Like, there are positive signs, but ultimately the results don't matter this year because like 50% of this team is not going to be on the team 2 years from now. So this is honestly like you have a college coaching regime for the Denver Broncos here. And, maybe they'll stay mid. Maybe they'll finally get to the playoffs in 2025. Because I don't think they're a playoff team next year in this Lord's AFC that has like 11 teams that are all within 2 games of each other. But Denver is beginning reinventing this roster, and maybe that's part of the culture change thing Sean Payton was talking about. Again, I don't think it's going to work out the way they think it's going to work out, but that's also a byproduct of existing in a division that has Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert, and a conference that has like the Steelers, who are crap on offense and are still 6-3. So it'll be interesting to see how they piece this whole thing together over the next couple of years.
Broncos are 4-5 on a 3-game heater. Let us know below in the comments section if you think they'll be able to keep it up. If you're liking some of the improvements they've made over the last stretch of games, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on our social medias. From Juju and Kyle, stay safe, happy, and healthy. We'll see you next time.